The day Michael English's career ended, Bill Gaither could have walked away, and nobody in that world would have blamed him for it. What Gaither chose to do instead is something Michael English spent 30 years carrying quietly, and at 64, he finally confirmed what was said between them. When you hear it, you understand why those words didn't just rescue a career. They pulled a man back from the edge of everything. Before we go any further, if the untold stories behind gospel music's greatest voices are what you come here for, subscribe right now, because we share stories like this every week. And coming up next, we're going to tell you about the night Bill Gaither himself nearly walked away from gospel music for good, and the one person who stopped him. You don't want to miss that. Henderson, North Carolina, is where Michael English grew up, the son of a Pentecostal preacher, and music found him early and never let go. Joining the Gaither Vocal Band in the mid-1980s, his tenor voice, wide and warm and capable of bending a melody in ways that made audiences go completely still, became one of the most recognized sounds gospel music had ever produced. That 1991 homecoming recording, the one captured in the Gaither living room in Alexandria, Indiana, that would grow into one of the most beloved concert series in Christian music history, built a significant part of its emotional weight around what Michael English could do with a song. By early 1994, a Grammy Award sat on his shelf, and the Dove Awards had named him Male Vocalist of the Year and Artist of the Year, the highest honors the gospel world offers. To the millions who collected the homecoming videos and filled those concert halls year after year, Michael English wasn't simply a singer. He was the sound of what faith feels like when it's working, which made the spring of 1994 land the way it did. At the 25th annual GMA Dove Awards, Michael English walked away with 6 awards in a single evening, including Male Vocalist and Artist of the Year, a sweep no gospel artist had achieved before, and none has matched since. The community celebrated him the way they celebrate someone who comes along once in a generation, and for good reason. None of that prepared anyone for what followed within weeks of that night. News broke that English had been involved in a relationship outside his marriage, an affair with fellow gospel singer Maribeth Jordan, who was pregnant, and in one moment, the man holding 6 Dove Awards became the center of the most painful public scandal contemporary gospel music had seen in years. Every award went back. The Gaither Vocal Band was done. The homecoming family, the recordings, the stages, all of it disappeared in the span of days, because stepping away was the only honest response left available to him. The gospel community reeled. Bill Gaither had spent years carefully assembling something extraordinary with those homecoming recordings, gathering legends into warm, unscripted settings that felt less like concerts and more like actual family gatherings, and one of the brightest voices in that family had just fractured something sacred. What almost nobody outside that inner circle understood, though, was that before Michael English walked out of the Gaither world, Gaither walked toward him. No cameras, no public statement, no audience of any kind. Gaither came the way you show up for someone in a burning room, not because being seen there helps you, but because you simply need to be there. The two men sat together privately in the immediate wreckage, and the question English carried quietly through the years that followed was a simple one. What does a man like Bill Gaither actually say to you in a moment like that? Here is what Michael English has confirmed. In the days right after everything collapsed, before the long silence began, before the 1995 album Healing, and everything that album would eventually mean, Gaither sat across from him and didn't lead with judgment. No distance was placed between them, no careful separation of Gaither's reputation from English's failure. What Gaither offered instead was something Michael would carry through addiction, through silence, through years of wondering whether any door back existed at all. Gaither told him that this failure didn't write the final sentence of his story, that God wasn't finished with him, and that as far as Bill Gaither was concerned, the relationship between them wasn't finished either. Saying that cost something real. Gaither had spent a lifetime building his work on the integrity of the message, and English had made that integrity genuinely harder to defend. Gaither chose those words anyway, and English has described them as the first crack of light in an otherwise completely dark room. The road back stretched long from that point, and English has never pretended otherwise. The Healing album opened a door, and listeners responded with a depth that surprised even those closest to the project. Thousands of people hearing their own brokenness named in those songs. But prescription drug dependency pulled him back toward the edge, and seasons arrived where the comeback felt like it had stalled permanently, where the homecoming world simply continued without him. What Gaither's words had done, though, was settle somewhere that the grief and shame and addiction couldn't reach. English has spoken about never feeling fully abandoned, even at the bottom of it, and that thread, that quiet sense that a door remained open somewhere, however distant, became the thing he held when nothing else was available. The homecoming family eventually welcomed him back, not with any formal announcement, not with a stage moment designed for maximum impact, but the way family actually welcomes someone home, with the particular warmth that belongs to people who chose to wait, and who are genuinely glad the waiting ended. At 64, looking back across 30 years of everything those decades contained, English speaks about what Gaither said to him, the way someone describes the first light they spotted in a very long darkness. Those words didn't carry him all the way home on their own. What they did was make him believe home was still a place he could reach, and that's the only thing a word of genuine grace ever needs to accomplish. Return for a moment to that private room, two men sitting together in the rubble of public disaster, when every practical reason available pointed toward a short conversation and permanent distance. What Gaither chose in that room is the most honest picture of what gospel music is actually supposed to be. Not the award ceremonies, not the touring schedules, not the chart positions. The real question is whether the grace proclaimed on a stage is the same grace extended behind a closed door, to someone who has made that extension genuinely difficult. Michael English's story attracts the cautionary tale framing easily enough. The Grammy, the historic Dove Award sweep, the fall, the addiction, the silence. None of that adds up to tragedy, though, because that's not where the story stops. The story stops at 64, with a man who walked through every dark room his life contained, and came out the other side still singing, still part of the community Bill Gaither built, as a living demonstration of the same grace that was extended to Michael English in his worst hour. Gaither has shepherded gospel music and the people who make it for more than 60 years, and the way he moved toward Michael English in 1994, when every easier option pointed in the opposite direction, may be the most honest sermon he has ever delivered. English still sings, and every time he does, that conversation travels with him. The one that told him, in the middle of the rubble, that grace isn't something gospel music merely talks about. It's something gospel music is supposed to be. Thank you for spending time with this story today. It's the kind that deserves to be told, and we're glad you were here for it. If you haven't subscribed yet, right now is a good time to do that. And coming up next, we're going to tell you about the night Bill Gaither himself nearly walked away from gospel music forever, and the one person who quietly stood in the doorway and changed his mind. You'll want to be there for that one.